Heart Midwives is all about why midwifery matters. So if you're pregnant, looking to become pregnant, someone with a uterus, or even care about someone with a uterus, then these conversations are going to be relevant to your life. Hi, I'm Cheryl Fuder. I'm a practicing midwife, homeopath, educator, and health coach. I believe deeply in the midwifery model of care, where pregnant women and people are fully listened to, their providers get to know them beyond numbers on a chart, and a place where continuity of care is the normal part of pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. Join us for stories on the history of midwifery, modern midwifery, pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and midwife life hacks. Subscribe for new episodes and share why you love midwifery in the comments. Let's dive in. Today we have with us Madison. I would love to have you tell us a little bit about yourself and what brings you here today.
So my name is Madison Deweese. I am a care manager actually for seniors in the community. I work for a home care company, and I'm a mother of 2.5-year-old and a 4.5-year-old.
Oh, that's so sweet. So tell us why you love midwifery.
I really love it just because of the power, frankly, that it gave me as a first-time mom specifically. I really wanted myself to be able to be in tune with my body and make those demands on my pregnancy journey and birthing story kind of as they came along, and just wanted it to be not so rigid. And that's really how I found, I guess, midwifery. And why I love them is because I've had 2 natural births I don't know that I would have been able to do that without the women that were by my side. So
congratulations for that. I can't wait.
Thanks.
I'd love to dive more into your stories if you want to share them. But I want to point out this piece that you just pointed out around the rigidity and how, midwifery really gets to know you, your midwives get to know you. And, just in the intro where I said beyond numbers on a chart, that's truly part of the midwifery model of care, is that we want to get to know you. We want to know what your story is like. Yeah. Can you speak a little bit more to that? Did you have both experiences during one pregnancy? What was that? How did you know that midwifery was your path?
Well, we had been trying to get pregnant for a little while. So as one does, Dr. Google away, and had really been looking again at what kind of process I wanted things to be. And had lots of friends and family members that had done the typical OB process, and knew that just wasn't for me and my body and my mentality, really. Again, I wanted something to be very organic. I wanted to be able to listen to my body and be empowered. That, before modern medicine, that lots of women before me did it. And I really, again, wanted that empowerment for myself, and didn't really feel like with the first visit that I had with an OB, I was going to get any of those things. So really started to explore the women in my community that had the title of midwife, and found my home there. So my first kiddo was born here in Boulder, Colorado. My second was born in Kansas. The 2 very different experiences, even with midwives both times. But again, I couldn't imagine doing it or my experiences being with anybody else. So,
yeah, oftentimes for the second baby, your body gets organized a lot quicker. The birth is a lot, it just kind of moves forward in a much more highway type of setting, rather than the first one where we're maybe on a country road, finding our path in that journey.
Yeah. And for sure, by the second time, especially being in a new state, I knew exactly what I wanted. And it was very important to me to find that, because I had such an amazing experience with my midwife group the first time. So, and again, to your point about paying attention and not feeling like I was a number, there were a couple of different tests that really came up alarming in the beginning with my first. And she very much had a very settled approach to things. If you want to dig into this, here are your options. If you don't, these are your options. And again, I always felt like I was in the driver's seat, and that nobody else was telling me how I could have my kids
Mm-hmm.
and what that meant. And so I think as a woman, and especially as a first time mom, I just know so many other women whose experiences are not the same. So anytime I can preach the message of a midwife, I'm like, please check it out. So,
I love that. Yeah, it's just so valuable. And you speak to like one of the principles of the midwifery model of care is like the autonomy of the
mhm.
person who is actually carrying the baby. They have autonomy over their bodies. And so, like, really being able to enhance that and bring that out in your care is something that you speak to. It's really
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious if you can go back to like that thought process of like, when you were, it sounds like you had like one visit at like a conventional OBGYN visit,
Mhm,
for your pregnancy and you had a little bit of struggle getting pregnant. So you might have kind of been sort of in the fertility world a bit anyway,
mhm.
doing blood tests and things like that. And then once you were pregnant, like, if somebody was coming to you and kind of wondering, like, what was it that made you even like think about midwifery or like search for that? Because so many moms I feel like are out there and they just don't even know that they have an option. And
Mhm.
so I think when they hear or see other moms that have like made that choice, I think it can be really valuable to kind of think about like what were the questions that you asked yourself or like the values that you came across when you decided like, yes, I want to choose a midwife.
So again, I work with seniors, and especially when you work with end of life processes for people, there are just like there are few different ways to come into this world. There are a few different ways to exit it. So really, because of my profession, I'm know that sometimes traditional ways of doing things are not necessarily the best, or what's best for body, what's best for soul. Um, and again, as beautiful as modern medicine can really be, I throughout my short life on this earth have had just moments and things that have come across in my health journey where it has been the rigid answer that I got from the doctor of this pill will fix this. That just has never really resonated with me and been my cup of tea. I'm more like, let's eat a few more blueberries before we take a pill for something. So, again, kind of just with my professional background and me as a person, especially after having that first visit, we were really lucky that I definitely would not say I struggled necessarily with fertility, but
Oh,
we had
right.
been trying for me what seemed like a really long time. And that was the traditional OBGYN was the traditional, what you're just supposed to do from where I come from in my education. And so, again, when I went to that appointment, telling you everything I just have about myself and again, my profession, the bedside manner was terrible. The quick emergency reaction to a test that really was, crazy in numbers and fractions and all of those crazy things. Again, I just knew that there's got to be a different way to do this. And I had one friend, a really acquaintance, that I knew had a home birth. We like were in an exercise class or something together.
Oh, cool.
Matter of fact, I think it was a yoga class. And I'd heard her, mention this a couple of times. And so again, after that appointment, I was just like, this is just not for me. I have to be able to be, if I'm going to be able to do this, I have to be able to be in tune with my body and feel and trust that the person that it's going to be beside me is going to honor those things the same way I feel like I honor people's wishes at the end of their life.
Mm.
So, and again, there's just something that midwives bring in a very organic way to all of those values. So for me, again, I don't really know how people find this if you don't explore other alternatives to traditional, medicine or doctors, I guess. But I would say to any woman that I think if you look up the pure definition and bedside manner of an OBGYN versus a midwife, that most people, I think, will gravitate towards the warmness and familiarity of a midwife or midwifery.
Mm. I love, yeah, it's like kind of like follow your gut. Like if you're not feeling intuitively like things are right or like you're
Mhm.
getting the information you need or that you're able to ask the questions you need to ask or or your values just aren't aligning with your provider, like seek a new provider, essentially.
I agree. I
It's
agree because
okay.
this person is going to be with you in the most intimate setting of your life or one of the most intimate settings. And so I wanted to be excited when that person walked through the room, even if it wasn't necessarily my midwife. I wanted to know that, the shots that I wanted given, and if I wanted to be in the tub, if I didn't want to be in the tub, if I wanted to be stark naked, I could, excuse me, but just do whatever felt right. If I felt like I needed medical intervention, that was an option to me. I just wanted to be able to like literally pick and choose as my body was going through these moments so that I could have the tools to just honor whatever I felt like that was. And again, I feel like I got all of that from my beautiful midwife. So I just love her to
Oh,
pieces. I wish I could have just carried her from Colorado to Kansas with me. And saying all this out loud, we took a birthing class. There was a doula who ran the birthing class at the hospital. And oh my God, I just don't even know what I would have done without her calm presence as well. And again, really encouraging me that your body was made to do this. And even with the health troubles that you may face, like with the right team, will take you as far as that can go. And that was exciting to me. So
wow, that's super great. Would you like to share your birth stories? Are you interested in
sure. Yeah, no, I'm
awesome?
very proud of them.
Awesome. Yeah.
My and I need to say this with like these are not the stories that you tell other women sometimes because some women work way harder to get their children earthside than I feel like I had to, but I'm still very proud and victorious in my stories with them. So I just
Yeah.
have to give credit where credit is due, I feel like. But my first was amazing. Again, we had really prepped with that doula and my midwife to be able to really labor at home as much as humanly possible. And we lived about 15 minutes away, car ride from where I was choosing to be, and woke up in the middle of the night, and again, really felt like I knew that something was happening. And probably about 2 hours into that, called my midwife and told her what's happening. She's like, "Of course, like I think that you're gonna have a baby today." So really from start to that until contractions, whatever our count was, I can't even remember at the time. I'd been laboring in my bathtub at home with candles and my favorite music and all of that. And then again, when the contractions got bad enough where I was like, okay, the tub is not doing anything. We called midwife and told her that we were on the way to the hospital. I was there for 3 hours before she was born. So
Wow.
by the time I got there, the nurses were amazing. They knew again, my midwife had called the hospital and demanded my tub because I have back issues. So I was completely convinced that the warm water was going to help me, and it did. And they were again wonderful. They had the bath drawn for me. I had an amazing room that looked over the Flatirons, and um, stayed in that tub until literally I stood up, took 2 steps to the bed, and started pushing.
Wow.
And that was really amazing for me, and was able to be in whatever position I wanted to be in. And she was very encouraging, and so came Adelaide. So
Oh, that is really great. Yeah. I mean, I talk a lot about like that birth is like we all get in the car and we don't know what the road ahead looks like, but we know there's a baby at the end of it. So
Yep.
It sounds like yours was, kind of like a maybe a city street or like a highway or something where you're like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna go here and do this. And I'm
Yeah.
sure there were twists and turns along the way, but it's really cool. It's babies are meant to be born, and you did it. Yeah.
And thank you. And it was really great because like the midwife that helped deliver her was not the normal main midwife I'd been seeing of the group.
Mm.
But again, like when she walked in the room, I can just remember being like, it's okay. Because I had confidence that she had the same morals and values. And even if we were in a traditional setting of a hospital, that she was going to uphold my birthing plan. And um, there is something very beautiful sometimes in silence. And she just brought, I feel like she was just like an angel walking through my room. She was
Oh.
kind of like just the comfort blanket that I really needed at the time. And with my second, she was born in COVID.
Mm.
And I am a little OCD and again work in healthcare. And it was a perfect time to kind of spiral with all the thoughts being a 2020 mother. And this was a midwife I had seen and met before, but again, not really worked with primarily. And my my kid was coming so fast. So because of COVID, we had been at the hospital for 45 minutes before I was like really ready to push. Um, and I can remember one of the nurses saying like something to the effect of like there's no doctor or midwife here, you can't push. And Natalie, my midwife, walked in and she was like, don't you tell her what she can and cannot do.
Yes, good for
And this
her.
sweet woman who had like never even raised an octave, out of place with me, just like came in like superwoman. And I was like, where did this superwoman come from? And I was so tired at the time that I don't even know that I would have been able to stick up for myself. So and then she came over and she was like, I don't know if you remember me. It's TMI, but I was like down on all fours. I was like staring at the floor. She's like, this baby's ready to go. Are you? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, let's do it.
Oh my gosh.
I'll just never forget those words ever. So I pushed, I think, like 6 times and Ella was here. So
We all have our bossy midwife voice, is what I call
I
it.
love it.
It's
It's
like
exactly
authoritative.
yes. And I needed that, like, because I can remember being like,
But it wasn't with you, it was with the nurse. It was like,
yeah,
hey, like if she's pushing, like her baby's gonna come out. Like, don't stop that process. And I've heard so many
exactly.
stories of women who they were told, the doctor's not here, don't push, don't push, don't push. And I get like don't add to it, but like there's the body like is trying to get a baby out. So it's gonna do the work, whether you're adding to it or not. And
Agreed.
so yeah.
I agree. Yeah, she was again, both women they were exactly what I needed when I needed them to be that in that moment. I don't know how else to describe that, but even in my own sister who didn't use a midwife, her birthing story is just not as pleasant as mine. And I just, again, not to discount any doctor that is out there or their processes, but there is just something different about a midwife approach and something that women have been doing since the beginning of time. So if you can release into that and that methodology and trust your body, I think that there's a lot of good things that can come from those combined powers. So,
Oh, well, and that just brings up the point for me that, the countries with the best outcomes for, people who are giving birth and babies are the ones that have midwives that run the labor and delivery.
mm-hmm.
They're often integrated with the hospital, home birth, birth center potentially. Like they're often all so integrated. And if there's a complication during the pregnancy, the birth, or the postpartum, then an obstetrician
Mm-hmm.
is brought in to the care, but you don't lose your midwife. Your midwife
Right.
is still your care provider throughout that
Hmm.
whole process. And these countries have the best outcomes. They have the lowest maternal mortality rate and
Hmm.
the best outcomes for babies and the most satisfaction for moms. And for me, I'm like, yeah, let's get back to that in the United States. Like, midwives have ran the show here, and it's only been the last, 125-ish years that really there was a very effective propaganda campaign that used a lot of xenophobia and a lot of racism to
Hmm.
eliminate midwifery out of the mainstream, mainstream memory. And
Yeah,
so, just midwives are the ones who are meant to be serving, pregnant people and mothers and babies. Whereas,
I agree.
you know, obstetricians are surgeons. We love them for that. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
no,
you for being the
and
high risk things. Like, we need that 5 to 15% of the
yeah, yeah. And I had heard in one of your other episodes somebody said like the emergency around everything.
time.
And that really struck home for me because I definitely feel that there are decisions that are being made on behalf of mothers and babies because it's very urgent and very convenient for whoever is running that urgency. And that to me is just simply not fair. And then postpartum wise, to be treated like that after you just brought a human earthside really sets up in our society moms, in my opinion, to really fail the majority of the time.
Mm, yeah.
It sets up unrealistic expectations of, especially the first year of motherhood and that fourth trimester. To me, and what midwifery brought to me and the confidence was that like it's okay to be low and slow. Like
Mm.
that pace is fine. And here in America specifically, we get so rushed that even birthing is rushed. um, and I would just tell women out there, like, it doesn't have to be that way. Uh, Again, with the right team behind you, some babies are very rushed, and I think mine kind of are probably that story. But again, it just doesn't have to be that way. It can be a different tone and flow and experience. But I think it's sometimes hard for women because, to your point, it's midwifery is just something that is we just don't talk about it. We and not as much as we should, which is why I volunteered to be talking with you today because
Yay.
I just can't imagine my experiences being any different than they were. And I have family members that'll come back and they're pregnant again, and I'm like, please explore a midwife. Please, please,
Yeah.
please. Because again, I just think that no matter what, even when you have children that need the specialized attention or potential surgery, there is still almost in a doula fashion from your midwife, like an advocate that's there of, again, slow things down. Does the birthing person have all of the information that they need to make the next step, whatever that step may be? So I
And
love
there's,
the empowerment.
yeah, oh, I love that. There's something that that highlights again is that, like, that continuity of care too. Is that, like, I mean, in your example or your situation, you were with a group of midwives.
Mm-hmm.
And though, like, you trusted that the whole group understood your needs, and so any one of those people, and that's how a good midwifery group runs, is that they all
Mm-hmm.
understand each person's needs, so that whoever shows up at the birth is, like, in tune with what you have been talking about, what you want, and
Mm-hmm.
then they bring their own tools and support you in that journey. And when you hire a private midwife, like a solo midwife, then that person is like your continuity of care piece. And so, even and specifically postpartum, like exactly what you're talking about, that first year postpartum, like, even if there's something that happens, some reason why we So I'm a home birth midwife. If I wind up in the hospital with a client, there's a reason why we're there. And then when we get back home, sometimes there's repair that needs to happen around the birth story or around the postpartum or around the nursing journey, the beginning of the nursing journey. And when that repair needs to happen, it's like crucial that you have somebody that you trust so much and that has already been with you during the whole process, so that when you're stepping into that space with them, and breastfeeding is difficult and all you've been told are like different advice from different nurses telling you how to do it right, and just all the things, and it can get so overwhelming, and somebody who comes in and just like, let's slow down, let's celebrate this reconnection, this thing that your baby's doing, like this is really normal, this is a natural process, like let's celebrate that. Like it's not all about like get the baby on the boob and nurse. Like that's actually only one part of the breastfeeding experience. Like there's a whole system around it that involves mom and baby and the actual milk of the breastfeeding. So that continuity of care piece is so valuable and important. And it sounds like you just, like every step of the way, it just is really supportive of you and your journey.
Most definitely. Because with my second, she was born jaundice, and we had quite the trouble starting our breastfeeding journey. And there was like a physician on call that had to mark X, Y, and Z things for us before we could be discharged. And to make a longer story shorter, I like eventually called my midwife and was basically like, they are not letting me leave. And I don't feel like you know about this. And of course, she was, again, my superhero to the rescue and called and I think talked some sense into whatever physician had on their mind for our goals before we could leave the hospital. And we were allowed to discharge that evening after she called. So again, I just think it's, there are just certain things that can happen along the way that, yes, maybe struggles, and yes, of course, are things that you want to keep an eye on, but they just maybe aren't a make it or break it. Like it's not having a baby and breastfeeding or feeding in general. It's just not black and white as we like to make it. And I feel like midwifery for me is the gray in between everything, which, bridges life for me. So, and still even now, I prefer to see a midwife for my continued women's care. So there's just something different about the women that are, and persons, right, that are called to midwifery. There's just something different about your heart. So,
thank you.
I mean that.
Oh, thanks. I'd love to ask you if there are like life lessons, or like you kind of started touching on it. So I'd love to like elaborate into that a little bit more, but like how midwifery and how the way that you had midwives and birthed your babies into the world, how that came into your parenting and how that experience, you mentioned empowerment a lot. And so I'd love to hear how that circles into the way that you parent and have brought yourself into the world as a mom.
I am always reminded, and it really starts with my birthing stories, and I feel like I have very fiery, fierce women children. But the more that I try to put my expectations on my birthing story or my breastfeeding journey or them now as toddlers, it always seems to like go awry. But when I can just let them do their thing and really more try to be a guide for them, I feel like my midwife was to me like a guide to something that just in time will take care of itself, I guess. That is probably more the way that I parent than anything now. I tend, again, to be sometimes somebody who I function in routine and habitualness, and my children really remind me to take every day as it comes and be in the moment and listen to what it is that our bodies or our brains or our souls like need in that moment. And I think that is a reminder that has happened to me on a daily basis, again, from the start. of just being pregnant and being with my midwives. You can release to the moment and again, still guide things, but lower your expectations a bit, take things slow and be in the moment and own what you need in that moment. I think that that works out for you great for a birthing story or to parent toddlers. So, because oftentimes in toddlers, you have to like, yeah,
teenagers, young
look,
adults.
I'm not there yet, but I have a feeling that again, just being open to pivot and being okay with whatever that pivot looks like and just appreciating that again, like that's what I need to be able to continue forward. All of that is okay. And that looks like something different for all of us. So,
wow, that's really beautiful.
it's true for me.
Yeah, yeah. And it's, women remember their birth stories. Oftentimes you work in senior care. I would love to like hear if, you've ever had the opportunity to ask your elderly patients if they remember their birth story or when their babies were born. From what I've heard, unless there's like severe memory issues, like often they will remember that with clarity. If they have any kind of memories of their past, they'll remember their birth stories really clearly. Although
100%.
oftentimes that generation were also put completely under an anesthesia too. So sometimes they're like, oh, I don't know, I was completely put out and then I had a baby and that's just how it was.
I deal with all of the Earth's creatures and all of their beings. So I'll say this, it's like you get very farm folks, if you will, that, ladies were like smoking a cigarette and their mother was like helping them give birth, which is, whatever the times may be. And then to your point, the very opposite of that, where it was very normal to be under some sort of drug or anesthesia and that's how they were encouraged to have births. But here in Colorado, the stories are so vastly different than from my experience with seniors in Missouri and Kansas. So in the best of ways, because they're so dramatically different. But again, I think that there's been something to say that the women who maybe didn't have a hospital 30 minutes down the road from them, right? They really almost didn't have any other choice but to accept midwifery. And I think that their stories are very beautiful, empowering, and things that they remember up until their last breath. I have literally seen seniors that can tell me how their children were born and can tell you how many, but if their child walked through the door, they probably wouldn't be able to tell you who that child was, right? So it's something that impacts us as women, as birthing people, that is stamped in our memories, I think, forever. And I think that that's why it's extremely important to, if you're not happy with your provider, even if you're so far along that you don't know if you can change, I just think it's important to trust whoever is going to be by your side for that extremely important day. I just cannot say that enough to people. Like, you're the bus driver. So
I just got goosebumps. I mean, just hearing, like I said, I've heard it, but I haven't heard it from somebody who actually experienced the fact that, these women can remember their birth stories all the way up to their last breath and maybe not even recognize their kiddos as adults in the same way, but they'll still remember their birth stories. It's a cellular memory. It's deep within us.
Yeah.
So, wow.
I agree.
Wow. That is so powerful. Okay. Well, we talked a lot about how midwifery has impacted you. Are there any other stories you want to share about, like, when you saw midwifery in action, or just anything else that you want to share to convey, like, what you love about midwifery and how it's impacted you in your life?
I just think that sometimes, at least in my own personal experience, when I bring up midwifery, some people think that, midwifery have their own point of views on medication or no medication or medical interventions during birthing process or not. And I think, again, my message to any community would be that midwives are there to make your story happen. So again, just me telling my side of the story with having two natural births, like that was my goal. That doesn't have to be your goal. And so I think that there is somebody for everybody. And if you're looking for a warm process, where you again are the bus driver, your own advocate, midwife to me is just something to explore. And again, it doesn't have to be in a tub or at home. It can be in a hospital. It can be in a tub at home. Like it is whatever your vision is, I think. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that's the ultimate goal of midwives is just to make sure that whatever birthing story you want to have, that we get as close to that as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah.
We need more midwives. We have, more midwives working in the hospitals, more midwives, more opportunities for birth centers, more opportunities for home births in every community across the board. And they all need to be working synergistically together because, like I said, we get in the car, we don't know what the road ahead looks like. But as midwives, we are doing our best to guide it in, of course, the best possible outcomes, but the best possible outcomes also include like your experience of it and your desires. And it's like the greatest gift that I have as a midwife is I get to sit and listen to, a woman's dreams and their stories and their experiences and their fears and everything. And I get to hold that as we, get in the car of labor and then once the baby's here and just everything along the journey. Like it's so powerful. And wow, I really appreciate you sharing your stories today.
No, thanks for letting me come and share them. I just hope in the world of YouTube, my children aren't embarrassed one day from hearing their birthing stories, but it'll be okay. We'll get through
I can't imagine that they would be because I just think their stories are so lovely. And when they're a little older and they can kind of like sink into it. Ooh, there is something really cool that I sometimes tell parents, and your kids are probably about the right age where they just are starting to get words, but they're still kind of in that like fantasy world. But sometimes you can ask them like if you're like in a quiet moment, things aren't too like busy and just hustling around and things. When you're in those quiet moments, you can like ask them like, what do you remember about your birth? Like, and they might share something. My nephew one time shared, he was like, womp, 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 womp. And he was born by cesarean. And so I'm like, oh, maybe, and I have to interpret it a little bit, right? But I was like, maybe that was like the heart rate monitor and them kind of coming in and like getting his head or something. Cause, they come in through the belly and get the baby's head to come out first. And so, yeah, I mean, he's older now. He's like 13 now, but I know
it's so funny that you bring this up because
I want to know.
We asked our oldest probably a couple months ago. We were like bored on Christmas break, and we asked her, "How were you born?" And she said it was fast and a bright light,
Ooh.
and which is not far off from and who knows, right? But if you like to think of things in that manner, again, I think having somebody else on that other end to help create positive memories could do nothing but good things for you as a parent.
Oh my gosh. So. And there's actually a movie, it's called What Babies Want. It's pretty, it's kind of dated now, but it's still super valuable if anyone's interested. But there's a movie called What Babies Want. And in that movie, there's a psychologist that specifically deals with like birth trauma for the child, I think is what that person does. And she has all these toys and they're hospital toys. And so the mom and the psychiatrist are like talking and the little girl, she's like maybe 5 or 6 in the story. She's over there playing with all the hospital toys. And she sets up the birth room exactly how it was set up in real life. And the mom recognizes it. She's like, oh my gosh. And the baby is like over far in the warmer, like far away from the mom because that mom had a cesarean birth. And the psychiatrist like asked this little girl, or like, tell me about this thing. And she's like, baby's over here. And, just kind of using her rudimentary words. And she said,
Mhm.
well, where should the baby be? And she takes the baby out of the warmer and puts it on mom's chest. And from her story, the mom and little girl, who's now like 5, who had like a very tenuous relationship where they were just like at each other all the time and they never felt like they bonded. The little girl comes over and hugs her mom, and they just like melt into each other, and just like so much is healed from that experience. And I'm not saying that every baby like remembers having some kind of traumatic experience, but when there's like
Yeah.
tension there and tension in the relationship, there is a cellular memory. We have memories of our births. And that's what
Mhm.
that movie and the associating organization study are,
Yeah.
the birth psychology organization. But I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's why I love asking little kids when
Yeah.
they're still in that little like fantasy fresh world, but they have a few words
Mhm.
that they could help us kind of hear it.
There's a book, it has nothing to do with birthing, but it's called The Body Keeps Score.
Oh, I've heard of that book. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, really, what it comes down to is exactly of that title, that your body, even if your conscious is not aware, is constantly keeping scores of effectively the emotional and physical trauma that happens to it over time. And you just can't have, for me, I can't have that same methodology when dealing with seniors and not expect that as soon as they come earthside, that our bodies are still impacted in some capacity, even if, again, we're not cognitively aware of those impacts. So, um, again, having somebody on the other side that uh, is a sliver of believance in that, and is walking with your same morals and values, I just think is important and empowering. I just cannot
Oh
get
my
over those
gosh.
words when it
I
comes
love
to
that.
midwives.
I love that. I love that you shared your stories. So you shared your stories. Do you have ways that people can follow your family, your life, or I
Oh,
know that you
no.
work for like a facility, so I wasn't sure.
Yeah, no. So I work for Visiting Angels. It's a franchise here in Colorado. I don't have any like account pages or anything like that. I'm just a working mom. We do have, if you are local here in Colorado, we have Traveling Tots Longmont that I run,
Ooh,
which is
cool.
a Facebook page, basically just promoting events in the Boulder County area for young families. So if anybody's listening, you can post your own play dates there if you live nearby. And there's also a page in Kansas City, Traveling Tots Kansas City as well, that a friend of mine now runs. So,
Okay, Traveling Tots, and we'll make
mhm.
sure to include that link in the links in the comments below.
Awesome.
Yeah, I super, super love and appreciate your stories. These have been so fun to hear and talk about midwives and midwifery. And you said it, somewhere in your stories, but like we don't talk about it enough, which is like
Mhm.
why I wanted to start this because I was like, we have
And
to
I
talk
love
about
it.
this more. Like midwives do such important work. And I know that midwives are working on like every level to like help
Mhm.
get things like, more accessible and to help make sure that many people can be served by midwives. Like I said, midwives in every community, and yet I don't think we hear from people who used midwives. And like
Mhm.
I think people, like you said, people have all kinds of ideas about who midwives are. You have to be a certain kind of person to have a midwife,
Yeah,
and that's like just not true. Like the kind of
agreed.
person that you need to be is someone who's menstruating to menopause. And
Right.
then, like, essentially we mostly serve the childbearing year, but there are midwives that, serve all the way from menarche when, someone with a uterus starts bleeding all the way through
Yep.
menopause. And, technically we have training through all of that. And specifically during that childbearing year. So just really like, yeah, let's
Yeah,
make
the
midwifery
person that uses midwifery is anyone.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. And
So.
in my show notes, I'm like, even if you care about somebody with a uterus, like these are
Which I
important. 'Cause,
love
like,
that.
yeah, like partners are like hugely important to the whole process. And like
Mhm.
they are part of this whole experience too. Like a lot of times, especially in that postpartum period, I'm really also caring for the partner and making sure that that person is also transitioning really well with having the
Mhm.
baby and having their partner, their wife, like experience who just experienced this huge dramatic transformation.
Mhm.
Now, how are they all integrating this into their life? Are they integrating it well? And I'm really supportive of that when it is, a healthy relationship. If there is a relationship, sometimes I got single mamas and I love them too, but
Yeah, yeah.
ah, awesome. Well, we will share all those links in the comments, and just thank you so much for sharing about why you love it,
Yeah.
midwives.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate you.